If finally, I'm given a chance to live again, naturally I don't want to repeat the same mistakes. Hot tears burst forth from my eyes, and I caught a glimpse of Qin Yushan's hurried figure in my peripheral vision. A flash of shock passed through Shinjin's eyes, but now you can only marry me. Before I could react, Shinjin continued, even if everyone in the capital believes that Zhou Yu is pretending to be a deity and that his fortune-telling is just nonsense. But now the whole city knows that I, Shinjin, am willing to go against my mother for you. Shinjin leaned closer, the warm breeze scattering the hair by my ears, but it made my back feel cold. Who dares to marry the person I, Shinjin, want? I turned my head abruptly and saw the sharp eyebrows in front of me slightly raised. I looked at Shinjin in disbelief, realizing that I didn't understand him at all. The Shinjin who deceived himself after my death in the last life was the same as the Shinjin in this life, who sometimes wanted to kill me and sometimes was willing to tarnish his own reputation. The first proposal was a test, but what about this time? Before I could figure it out, I heard Qin Yushan's voice from the other side. The person of Qin Yushan, of course, I will marry. The young man's voice was calm, which made the stone in my heart fall to the ground. I was secretly delighted, and finally he took the bait. Shinjin, on the other hand, was caught off guard by Qin Yushan's arrival, and his expression changed several times. Qin Yushan walked over quickly, originally intending to reach out and hold me, but when their eyes met, he quickly avoided, and the color behind his ears betrayed his emotions. In the end, Qin Yushan stood between me and Shinjin, his broad shoulders like a mountain, standing between me and Shinjin. I bit my lip and looked down, not letting myself laugh. Zhou Yu is pretending to be a deity, and it involves too many things. Moreover, the longer this matter drags on, the worse it is for both Shin and Miss Wen. Therefore, I specially asked the Emperor for an order, requesting to execute Zhou Yu as soon as possible to avoid trouble. Shinjin's face immediately turned dark. The Emperor also thinks it should be so. At the same time, considering that the Shin and Wen families were instigated by Zhou Yu, the Emperor decided not to pursue it, which also saved the reputation of both of you. If Brother Shin really cares for Miss Wen, he should marry someone else as soon as possible, mend the relationship with old lady Shin, and also cut off the reason for the gossip about Miss Wen's bewitchment in the capital. Qin Yushan's words were reasonable, leaving Shinjin speechless. I never expected that Qin Yushan, who looked stupid and clumsy when teasing, would be so eloquent when arguing. After all, it was in the prison, and with Qin Yushan's arrival, Shinjin couldn't keep me by force and had to let me go. Shinjin's words just now still echoed in my mind, unable to dissipate for a long time. Unconsciously, my gaze moved to Qin Yushan, and I suddenly felt melancholic. I originally thought that by marrying Qin Yushan, I would be able to live a worry-free life in this life, but I never expected that Shinjin could guess that I was reborn. Shinjin's attitude just now was clearly intended to entangle with me to the end. If Qin Yushan dies in the future, I'm afraid I will be forced into the same situation as just now by Shinjin. Miss Wen? Looking back, Qin Yushan's handsome features were magnified in front of my eyes. Are you scared, miss? Qin Yushan looked at me with concern, his eyebrows almost twisted into a knot. I shook my head. If General Qing doesn't mind, you can call me Ninger like my parents do. Qin Yushan scratched his head, and the gaze that just met mine dodged again. Ninger, You heard what I said with Shinjin just now. I have a past life of marriage with him. If it weren't for my own experience, I would think my own words were extremely absurd, and Qin Yushan had every reason not to believe it. But he didn't, and he helped me out of the predicament, and even said he wanted to marry me. You and Shinjin said that. I can pretend I didn't hear. Qin Yushan's eyebrows were locked even deeper. You insulted me and let me go to the Wen mansion to propose, and now I have prepared the betrothal gift. Do you want to pretend nothing happened? The ink pupils looked straight at me, filled with grievances. I didn't mean that. I'm afraid. Are you afraid Shinjin will not give up easily, or are you afraid I will die on the battlefield like in the last life? Before I could sort out the ins and outs of the matter, both of my hands were tightly grasped by Qin Yushan. Don't worry, I will live a long and safe life in this life, and I will not let you wait for me, nor will I let Zhou Yu's words come true. My body stagnated, and Qin Yushan was actually reborn too. Then the lies I made up about loving him in the last life are not true? But including this time, in the past 2 lives, you have only seen me twice. For a woman like me with a damaged reputation, you are willing to offend Shinjin and marry me, are you really willing? I carefully observed Qin Yushan's expression. If he regretted it or was reluctant, I would let go immediately. The last time we were physically close was intentional on my part, and the purpose was to marry you to fulfill my wish. I admit that I have been scheming for a long time and calculated to marry you, I said, pulling back my hands. Helplessly, Qin Yushan held on tight. Ninger, it's my fault. He looked at me nervously. I made you suffer. In the last life, I was focused on the war and the court, and I didn't know about your infatuation. In this life, I still didn't notice, but you, for me, took the risk to negotiate with the divine stick, destroyed your reputation, and even faced threats from Shinjin. Qin Yushan's eyes were clear, so clean that you could see the light slowly brightening from the bottom of his eyes, like a pool of spring water, reflecting my figure. Pity. I read pity from his eyes. The pity that I once coveted, belonging only to me. The corners of my eyes were sour, and before I could suppress the sob, Qin Yushan said again, I think God let me live again, it must be to let me not miss you. The temperature of the fingertips flowed on the back of the hand. From the moment I opened my eyes in this life until now, this moment is the most at ease. Because I know I have found the right person in Qin Yushan. The sincerity obtained by taking advantage of his full of heart, guilt and fear gradually surged up. Wasn't Shinjin also so determined with Yi Yanyu? But in the end, there was only a situation where they would rather not see each other between the two. Love itself is a sharp blade given away. Once rejected, the blade turns to oneself, stabbing oneself to pieces. Qin Yushan and I as allies, it is enough, there is no need to be emotional. He helped me get rid of Shinjin, and I also helped him escape the fate of dying young. After everything is done, if he meets someone he likes more, I can leave gracefully. Perhaps it was because I pondered for too long. Qin Yushan saw that I had been silent for a long time, and he was a bit flustered. Ninger, how about giving me another chance? His eyes fell heavily, and the ink pupils rolled back and forth under the eyelids, like a puppy afraid of being abandoned. Guilt more and more full of heart. I smiled at him and nodded. I have waited for you for a lifetime. If you are willing to marry me, I am definitely willing to marry. If Qin Yushan knew that my so-called infatuation in the last life was just a trick to deceive him into the game, would he still be like this now? I dare not think about it, at least not before I completely break up with Shinjin. Qin Yushan raised his eyes at the sound, and the two eyes collided, and his face turned red again. How could such a person who is ignorant of love be deceived by me? For some reason, I ghostly hooked my finger at him, signaling him to come over and listen. When Qin Yushan came over, his face was close, and his lips touched. Suddenly a white light stabbed into my eyes, and it turned out that the carriage curtain was lifted, and when my eyes regained their clarity, I found that my father and mother were watching outside the carriage. The two faces were full of shock. Qin Yushan was the first to react. Mr. Wen, Mrs. Wen. My father put away the shock just now and looked at Qin Yushan with a smile. Don't be a big man, it's so strange. Just call me father-in-law, mother-in-law. When my parents saw me returning home with Qin Yushan, they almost took me and Qin Yushan to the hall to get married on the spot. The two of them pulled Qin Yushan into the house all the way, talking about the dishes at the wedding banquet and how many children to have after marriage. Qin Yushan looked at me frequently, revealing helplessness in his eyes. I tried to speak several times, but my parents' voices were covered. Just when my father was halfway through the sentence, the 8th day of next month is a good day, suitable for marriage, Qin Yushan finally spoke. And not appropriate. He looked very serious. My parents and I were all stunned. And Mr. Wen, Mrs. Wen. Qin Yushan looked at me. Marriage is a big event, and it needs to be planned slowly. If it's too hasty, there may be oversights in the process, and I'm afraid it will aggrieve Ninger and cause others to speculate. I will ask the emperor for marriage at the palace banquet the day after tomorrow, and I can't miss any of the etiquette such as the betrothal gift, so as not to aggrieve Ninger at all. Qin Yushan's eyes were shallowly reflecting my figure, and the light in his eyes was scattered all over the floor. Before I could react, my parents were relieved and agreed. I was immersed in the touch, and I didn't notice the accident at the palace banquet the day after tomorrow. On the day of the palace banquet, I originally went into the palace with my parents. But I didn't expect that a palace maid would bump into me on the way, and the mutton soup in her hand was all spilled on me. The carefully dressed skirt was wet most of the way, and the smell of mutton soup spread, and my appearance at the moment was very inappropriate. The maid knelt down and pleaded for mercy as she saw this. I was in a hurry. Please forgive me, miss. What should we do? Qingling looked at my dirty skirt anxiously. Is there a palace nearby where I can change and wash? Today we are going to the palace for a banquet. If we are delayed, if the emperor is angry, no one can bear it. My mother glanced at the maid kneeling on the ground, frowning. There is an empty palace nearby. I will go and inform and borrow it. It should not be a problem. The maid wiped the tears from her face and relaxed a bit. I also prepare some hot water for washing, my mother said. Lin Shanggong in the palace and I were old friends before. I will go to her to ask for some clothes. Ninger, you go with her to wash first. You wait in the hall first, so that you can explain to the emperor in time if you are delayed. And remember to tell Yushan about this so he won't worry. My mother said to my father, and everything was arranged properly. But I always feel uneasy in my heart. Because in the last life, when I went to the palace with my parents to attend the palace banquet, everything went smoothly. The same road, the same time, but different experiences in the two lives. Is it Shinjin? Or Yi Yanyu? Thinking carefully, since I was reborn, I have not seen Yi Yanyu except for that time in the forest outside the temple. With her character that cares so much about Shinjin, there is something strange about this. The matter between me and Shinjin is known to everyone in the capital, but she has not made any trouble for me. Thinking of this, I can't help but be on guard. The palace is remote, and although the furnishings inside are old, they are very neat, not like being abandoned. It doesn't look dusty here, it doesn't seem to be vacant. I pretended to say casually, and my peripheral vision carefully observed the expression of the maid. Originally, there was an imperial concubine living here, who passed away a few months ago, and it has only been vacant for a short time. She answered naturally, and there was no sign of lying. Then she opened a door, and there were some bathing and grooming supplies in the room. Miss, wait in here for a while, I'll get some hot water. She turned to Qingling and said, I'm afraid it won't be enough for me to get it alone, please come with me. I nodded to Qingling and motioned for her to go. Luring me to a remote palace and finding an excuse to get rid of everyone around me, what is the purpose of such painstaking efforts? Not long after Qingling and the others left, there was indeed a rush of footsteps outside the door.